we speak of the home, I need to figure out who's in here today. If you are a newlywed, you've been married a year or less, or dating, can I see just show of hands? Somewhere in this auditorium, I can't fully tell from the lights, but I'm sure there was an undefined relationship where one hand went up and one didn't. And you're welcome for your lunch conversation today. All right, let's see who else is here. If you've been married more than a year, put your hands up. Keep them up. Married more than 10 years. Big jump, I know. 10 years, oh, wow, this is awesome. More than 20 years. 30 years. 40 years. 50 years. Oh, there's still a decent amount of hands up. Okay, I do gotta find out though. I gotta find out who's married the longest. Let's go 55. Anyone still hands up? 55? Shout, we got a couple couples. Shout it out if you've been married, I can't see everybody, more than 55 years. How many years? 58 and over here? 56 and over here? 58, anywhere else? Wow, can we give it up for those couples? If I missed you, I'm sorry. As we talk about a blessed home, that's who you talk to, all right? There's still more people in the home. Okay, let's talk about the middle school and high school students. Any middle school and high school students in here? At least give me like a head nod. Give me something, come on. Yeet, that's a word I am told I'm never allowed to use. Cool. All right, hands down. Single people, hands up, single people. Look around. You're welcome, all right. Well, hey, we are in week 2 of Bless This Home. And my name's Joel. If we've never met, I'm one of the many pastors around here. And the reason I do that is because when I say the word home, it means something very different depending on your situation. You might be empty nesters. You might be separated. You might be single. You might have kids still in the home, or you might be the middle schoolers and high schoolers who believe you run the home, but someone else signs the mortgage. It means something very different, right? And so during today's talk, and really the whole series, we are gonna speak to different aspects of the home. And here's what I need you to know today. This message is not for the other members in your home. Why? You can't change them. You cannot change them, but you can allow change to begin to happen in your life. After every time I preach, someone comes and talks to me and they're like, oh my goodness, I wish my spouse was here. I'm gonna send them this message. Listen, this message today is for you. So I'm gonna speak to different aspects of different lifestyles in the home. So let me start by speaking to those middle schoolers and high schoolers that had their hands up, all right? Here's what I need you to know when it comes to the home. I need you to know how much your parents or whoever your guardians are have invested in you. When it comes to the home, I need you to know how much they've invested in you. In fact, I mean invested in multiple ways, but I absolutely mean financially. It costs money just to walk by the kids section at Target, all right? Those shoes as babies, they're changing like every week. Your foot grows and someone's gotta pay for that. In fact, they've sent you to camps financially, right? We do our CIY camp, we do our fall weekend. They've bought you sporting equipment. They've bought tickets that these schools charge for like $27 for your musicals. Some of you have even gotten a car, all right? They've spent a lot financially. So I need you to understand that when you're like mom and dad, like, why don't we have a vacation home? Like, why don't we have a lake house? Like, what happened to us, mom and dad? Let's be clear. You happened to them, okay? They're clapping right now for that. They've invested financially, but that's not it. They have sacrificed so much, right? In fact, I know you think they're old, they're not cool, but they used to be cool once, right? But they had to spend all their money on your clothes. Your mama, she used to look just like she was a hottie. That's why your dad snagged her. Yeah, in fact, some of them, they can't wait as we talk about the home for you to graduate and get out of it so they can get back to kicking it. They've sacrificed money, they've sacrificed time. They've sacrificed trips. They've taken off work to go to your riveting middle school basketball game. They've been there for you. And so this is what I need you to know. As we talk about the home, you are very precious to the other people in your home. And so when we do a home series, it is not just for the other members in the home. This is for you. We want you in these auditoriums because it's for you. In the same aspect, everyone else that raised their hand, you are not off the hook either. This is a message for you. I will drive this into your heads today. This is not a message for your spouse or for your kids or for your parents. This is a message for you. How can we have a blessed home, and how can it begin with me? Well, let's open up our Bibles to Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus is talking about blessings. If you're kind of new to church, this is one of the greatest sermons that we have recorded in human history, known as the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount intros by something known as the Beatitudes. And Beatitudes is a Latin word for blessing, where Jesus tells us how to have a blessed life. And so our goal for the remaining weeks of this series is to take the words of Jesus and to contextualize how we have a blessed life specifically in our homes. Read with me, Matthew chapter 5, we'll pick up in verse 3 today. He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, right living, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Now, I need you guys to come back to weeks 3 and 4 because I cannot cover all of that today, but we will. We're gonna continue talking about these Beatitudes and the blessings. The only one we're gonna look at today is that final one I read. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Now let's break this verse apart a little bit. In the middle of this verse is a comma. This may be an ordinary comma to you, but this is a big comma because it separates two different things happening in this verse. The first half of the comma is the calling, the action. Blessed are the pure in heart. If you have a pure heart, you will be blessed. But the other side of the comma is the payoff. What is the blessing? Well, the blessing is that you will see what? God. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And so as we relate this to our homes, blessed are the homes with pure hearts, for their homes will see God. It will be a home that's just different. A home that people walk in and understand that there's something different about this home because it emanates the gospel of Jesus. It'll be a family that is reading together and praying together and serving together. It's a home that sees God. But here's the tension. I think for many of us here today, that payoff, we wouldn't determine as good enough. We wouldn't determine the payoff as seeing God as being a blessed home. In fact, I would argue that in the 80% of people in Livingston County that identify as a Christian, the majority of them would care more about a new home or a big home or a clean home than a Christ-centered home, a home that sees God. In fact, I would argue as we talk about the people, the hearts in the home, it would overlay into that as well. The people, the 80% that would identify as a Christian would say, I think I'd rather have a financially stable spouse than a godly one. I think as we look at the students we talked about earlier, our kids back in our kids ministry, many people would say, I'd rather have an academic or an athletic kid than one that looks and acts like Jesus. And so I wanna be clear today. I don't know where you are, okay? I don't know where you are, so I wanna be clear. Those other things I mentioned, if that's what you're looking for in a blessed home, you're gonna have to look somewhere else. Here at church today, during this series, when we're talking about a blessed home, we are talking about a Christ-centered home, a home that sees God. Now, what does that mean, to see God? Well, two things. One, when Jesus is talking about seeing God, he means two ways. One, absolutely physically. Absolutely physically. One day, you and your purified heart will stand before a holy, righteous God, the King of Kings, on the throne of thrones, and he will look at you and say, well done, good and faithful servant, and you will get to spend eternity with him. But not just physically, spiritually. Spiritually, about a year ago, I spoke during our Job series, and there's this part in the story of Job where he says, I had heard God, but now I've seen God. It's a whole different aspect where during your home, you see God at work. And I would argue, no matter what your thoughts or your preconceived thoughts coming in about what a blessed home look like, is one that sees God, is one that is blessed beyond what you can even ask or imagine. And a home that sees God is one that will overflow into every other area of the home. Now, that's the second half of the comma. Let's go talk about the first half of the comma. Blessed are the pure in what? Heart. The Greek word Jesus would have used here is cardia, not cardio, thankfully. Cardia, so we get the word cardiac. Now, obviously, Jesus is not talking about blessed are those who have a great blood pumping organ. He's talking about something very different, and we know this. He's got a good heart. We know, like my heart told me to do it. We're talking about feelings, inward, inner self. This is the heart. The problem with this is a verse Dave actually read last week for us. It's found in the book of Jeremiah. I'll read it again today. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9. It says this right here. The heart is deceitful. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? The problem is we like to think people have a good heart or we've got a good heart, but the truth is none of us do. Our heart, if we're actually to look inward at it, if other people actually knew what was going on in the heart, I think we would agree, there is something darkened and hardened and deceitful about our heart. So no such thing as good heart. So the good news is when your sister, your brother-in-law tells you about who they're with, and I know they live in a van down by the river, but got a good heart, you can say, no, they don't. The bad news is it's not because of their situation, you don't have one either. And so let me be clear. How do we get a good, new, purified heart? Well, it's not on our own. Let me share with you how we get a purified heart. It's found in the book of Ezekiel. God is speaking, and look what he says in chapter 36. He says, I will give you a new heart. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. We don't have good hearts. There are non-Christians who live a better, morally pure, give more, serve more than you do, than I do. We don't have good hearts. God gives us a new heart. God gives us a purified heart. How do we get a new heart? It's metaphorical, spiritual heart surgery by the great physician himself. It's the only way we have a purified heart. And so let's get on the same page here though, because this is very countercultural to what society tells us, okay? It is. In fact, there has been a shift in culture, in modern and pop culture, society, everything. There's been a shift where all of a sudden feelings equal truth. And I don't know when this happened because we don't see this in scripture, but there's all of a sudden this shift that if I feel a certain way, or if I would even argue repetitively feel a certain way, then it doesn't matter what scripture says, doesn't matter what my mama says, I'm gonna act on it because feelings equal truth, and if I don't do that, I'm being disingenuous and unauthentic. And let me take a step back, because from a step back, this does sound fun. Sounds like a party. Do whatever I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want. But my guess is if we were to talk to some of these married couples that have been married 50, 60 years, they're not there because they did whatever they want, whenever they want, with whoever they want. My guess is they looked at other people and they made hard decisions and they didn't follow their heart. Don't follow your heart, question your heart. It's deceitful at times. And culture is telling us the complete opposite. In fact, I've never met anyone in my life that's been like, I did whatever I want, whenever I felt like it, with whoever I want, and my life was just trajectory up and to the right. In fact, unfortunately, and many of you know these people, it's usually someone in a big house, all by themselves, with a strong drink in their hand, telling you stories about how they once lived it up. Don't follow your heart, question your heart. Because they make good sayings, right? Not just follow your heart, but, treat yourself, do you, but they make horrible lifestyles. And so what would it look like for us today to actually examine our hearts? In fact, some of you have even had this spiritual, metaphorical heart surgery. You've had the purification of the heart. And you remember that day. You remember that day like no other. And there's possible, though, that even since that day, there's been some stuff that has gotten into and disinfected your heart. What do I mean by this? Well, let me transition from the words of Jesus to the words of a man named Paul. The words of a man named Paul. Paul used to go by a name that was Saul, and he did this. He lived for himself. He lived for his heart. He did whatever he wanted. He hurt a lot of people while he did it. He had this heart surgery where he met Jesus, and he got a brand new heart. But even after he got his new heart, in the book of Romans, he says, but still, I do what I do not want to do. What I want to do, I don't do it. And today we're going to take Paul's conversation to the church of Ephesus. In Ephesians, we'll pick up in chapter 4, where he is talking to them about the heart. Ephesians is a port city, up and coming city, and he sees a lot of heart darkening going around. Look at what he says right here in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 18. He says, they are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their, what? Hearts. Have any of you ever walked into a movie theater and just been hit by the abyss of darkness? Right? Some of you guys walked today into this auditorium, you're like, oh my goodness. Has that ever happened? You're in a movie theater, you got your popcorn, your snacks, you smuggled in. Right, that's the one thing us Christians are like, I think God's gonna be cool with. I think, like, snacks are like 9, but the goobers are he's gonna be But you're in a movie theater, you got your snacks, you got your popcorn, and you walk in and you just get hit by this darkness. And you walk around and you stumble over these new reclining seats and you get to your chair and you sit there, and what happens after a little bit of time? You start to You start to get used to the darkness. This is what Paul is saying is happening to our hearts. There were things that it's possible after the purification of your heart that can only come from God that you knew broke the heart of God. And I knew, I'm just as guilty, broke the heart of God. And over time, things that we used to be convicted of, used to believe broke the heart of God, we've allowed back in. And possibly even spend hard-earned money and time being entertained by. And our hearts have become darkened and hardened. In fact, look at the conversation. It continues in the next verse. He says this right here. Having lost all sensitivity. They've been literally desensitized, like what happens at a movie theater. They've given themselves over to the sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they're full of greed. And so, what do we do? What do we do? If you're a note taker, 3 things. 3 things that Scripture speaks to when it talks about the heart. And as we examine our own darkened, hardened, possibly impure hearts, what do we do? First thing I'm going to talk about is guard it. Guard it. Where do I find this? Well, the wisest man to ever walk the earth, a man named Solomon, talks about this in the book of Proverbs chapter 4. This is what Solomon says. He says, above all else, guard your heart. Protect it, for everything you do flows from it. Guard it, protect it. And I think if I had to go around this auditorium, I don't think it even matters what age you are, every one of you could tell me a story about someone that you prematurely allowed into your heart and they did some heart damage. For me, one of the bigger ones was junior year of high school. I lived in Houston, Texas at this time, and I was a part of Clearbrook Baptist Church. And fun fact, at Clearbrook Baptist Church, when they spoke on the Beatitudes, it was not blessed are the pure in heart, it was blessed, all right? Blessed are the pure in heart. My dad was a senior pastor. And so we had led a lot of people into our hearts and into our homes. And there was another staff member that, I don't know his heart, I don't know the situation, but due to a certain passage my dad spoke on, he didn't enjoy the interpretation of it. Now, we were friends with this man. His kids were some of my best friends. And over time, instead of him bringing this to my dad, he started using the stuff that we were close with to get kind of ammo as he met with other people and formed a whole committee. And years after this sermon, on a Saturday, we were told we're no longer welcome at that church. There's pain and there's heart pain, right? Now, I do want to be clear on 2 things. One, This man has been forgiven, and we've talked to this man since then. We even see God's hand on the other side of this. And the other thing is guarding your heart does also not mean isolation. There are certain people that earn the right into your heart. These marriages that just raised their hands, yeah, absolutely. You should allow them into your heart. All I'm saying is the guy you've known 3 weeks, he probably doesn't deserve a part of your heart yet. You need to guard it, protect it. And not just from people. Let's use another analogy. How many of you guys have been robbed before? A decent amount of us. At the same church in Houston, Texas, one Sunday morning during church, someone came and broke into all of the cars in the parking lot, which just paranoid all of you. This happened, and so now I triple lock my car. It's gotta be in the light, it's gotta be up front. Why? It's been robbed. And in the same way, not just people are trying to get into our heart and may abuse it. We have a spiritual enemy that wants to rob us, scripture says, of stuff, of impurities, of what's going on in our heart. And so we need to guard it. We need to be very careful of who and what we allow into our heart. And as we relate this to the home, this is interesting. Because I think all of us would argue, yeah, we want to guard our home. We want to protect our home. And we want to protect the people in our home. But what's fascinating is parents and people get protected or get applauded for protecting their home physically, right? Protecting their kids physically, protecting their home physically, you get applauded. But the second parents or a home decides to protect their home morally or spiritually, you get called overprotective, or you get called legalistic, or your neighbors that you look different than make fun of you. And it's so fascinating as we talk about protecting, this is obvious. We would never let our babies eat poison, but we would allow our 14-year-old daughter to go on a date with a 16-year-old hairy-legged, pubescent boy that we've never met. We would never allow our kids to swim in acid, right? It's just obvious protection stuff, but we would allow our 10 or 11 or 12-year-old to have access to all information and impurities in every country in the entire world in their pocket with absolutely no software or blocking from it. What would it look like to protect, to guard, not just our heart, but the hearts in our home? Second thing is not just to guard it, it's to fight for it. Fight for it. Fight for what? Well, purity of the heart. Why? It's hard. It's hard. And so you need to fight. Look at what Paul says in the same conversation to the church of Ephesus. One chapter later, verse 5, this is what he says. But among you, there must not even be a hint. Everybody say hint. Hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Reminds me of a story I once heard a speaker say at a camp. He said that his daughter, she was asking permission to go see an R-rated movie. And he said, okay, what's the movie about? And she said, well, there's just a little bit of language, there's a little bit of emotion, but 90% of the movie is good, okay? Just 10%. So the same week his daughter was asking for this, his son came to him, said, hey, can I go to this party this weekend? I'm gonna let you know up front, parents are out of town, there is gonna be a little bit of drinking, a little bit of substances, but it's just a few people, the majority of us, you know the kids, there's just a little bit. He said his wife went into mama bear mode, and she went in the yard and just got a little bit of poop, dog poop. She put the dog poop in the brownies, just a little bit, that she was making for dessert. And after dinner, she slid the brownies over to her gifts from the Lord and said, hey, just want you to know, brownies are fine, 90% of them are fine, but there's a little bit of dog poop in the brownies. They, of course, were horrified. Why? Because the entire brownie was infected. And in the same way, just a hint can possibly turn into a smudge, which can turn into a darkened, hardened right heart. And so this is hard. This is gonna look different for you than the people around you. This means you cannot do everything that the world around you is doing. And people might call you overprotective. Or they might call you legalistic, but this isn't an action thing, this is a heart issue. And if our homes are gonna be blessed and see God, this is important. And what's interesting is this might not make a lot of sense, It might not make a lot of sense that you can't do that even though everyone else is, but there's something about happy, blessed homes that don't make a lot of sense. They're not usually the wealthiest or the prettiest, but there's something about the home that is blessed. And so for you, as you think back to your hearts, are there things that you used to be convicted by that you maybe aren't now that started with a hint? And for you, what is it as you fight for your heart that you might need to do the heart examination and the hard work of getting rid of, getting accountability around, letting people into? And then lastly, if this is gonna happen, even though this is the third point, it's really the first thing you need to do. It's get your own heart right. Guard it, protect it, but get your own heart right. I'm ending the message the same way I began it. This is not a message for the other people in your family. Some of you have already forgot that I said that. It's not a message for the other people in your family, and I get it. You're going, Joel, you obviously don't know my home, right? Because my spouse needs purification of their heart. And my kids need purification of their heart. And I have given them grace. And you're telling me after all this, I need to be the bigger person. I need to get rid of hints. I need to get right before God. I need to give them more and more grace again. That's not fair. And you would be correct. That's not fair. But if your home is gonna be blessed, it's gotta start with someone. And I would argue, it's gotta start with you. And here's why. Paul, the same author, writes another letter to the church of Rome, really the city of Rome. This is what he says right here in Romans chapter 5, verse 8. He says, but God demonstrated his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Well, we had shame and guilt, and we had no even plan to go towards God or near God. We were as far away as you could get from God. He went first for us. While we were still sinners, he died for us and offered us in our worst, darkest place something we didn't deserve. And hoping his church, his people would turn around and do the same. And so why do you need to go first? Because someone went first for you. Blessed are the homes with pure hearts, for they will see God. And so where do you need to go first? For some of you, you may need to initiate another date night with your spouse, even though they haven't initiated in years. Some of you students need to write a letter to your parents about all the things they've done for you and how much you appreciate it, even though you have a separate letter about all the times they've messed up. And now all of us in this room need to do a hard examination about what needs to go back on this path towards purification of the heart, because blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they will see God.